Hi, welcome to the channel Impressive Truth, and please subscribe the channel and share with your loved ones. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Grandview Hotel as Lila Chen fumbled with her key card, exhaustion weighing down every limb. 3 delayed flights, 2 canceled connections, and a luggage mishap that left her wearing yesterday's clothes had pushed her well beyond her limits. All she wanted was to collapse into bed and forget this disastrous assignment that had taken her from Seattle to Miami to cover a food festival that had been rained out. She slid the key card into the slot marked 2847, and the green light blinked welcomingly. Thank God for small mercies. Her editor had sprung for a decent hotel this time, probably guilt over the impossible travel schedule. The suite was magnificent, far nicer than anything her travel magazine's budget usually allowed. Soft lighting cast warm shadows across cream-colored walls, and the scent of expensive candles lingered in the air. A bottle of champagne sat chilling in an ice bucket near floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city lights bleeding through the storm. Lila dropped her laptop bag by the door and kicked off her waterlogged shoes. Marble floors were cool against her feet as she padded toward the bedroom, too tired to appreciate the luxury surrounding her. The bed looked like something from a 5-star resort catalog, with pristine white linens and more pillows than any reasonable person needed. She didn't even bother changing clothes. Sleep called to her with an urgency that overrode everything else, including basic hotel room etiquette. Within moments of her head hitting the pillow, stress of travel melted away into blissful unconsciousness. The sound of running water pulled her from deep sleep hours later. Sunlight streamed through partially open curtains, and for a disorienting moment, Lila couldn't remember where she was. Then she noticed things that hadn't registered in her exhausted state the night before. A man's watch on the nightstand, expensive cologne lingering in the air, and a suit jacket draped over a chair that definitely wasn't part of the hotel's standard decor. Her heart began to race as the shower shut off in the adjoining bathroom. This wasn't her room. Somehow, impossibly, she'd ended up in someone else's bed. The bathroom door opened, and steam billowed out, followed by a man wearing nothing but a towel around his waist. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair still damp from the shower, and sharp green eyes that widened when they landed on her. They stared at each other in mutual shock for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. "Well," he said finally, his voice surprisingly calm given the circumstances. "This is unexpected." Lila pulled the covers up to her chin, her face burning with embarrassment. "I am so sorry. I don't know how this happened. The key card worked, and I was so tired." "Breathe," he interrupted gently, holding up a hand. "It's okay. These things happen." He grabbed a robe from behind the bathroom door and slipped it on, making the situation marginally less awkward. "I'm Julian Cross. And you are?" "Lila Chen, travel writer, completely mortified person who somehow broke into your room." She scrambled to sit up, keeping the blanket clutched around her. "Go right now. This is so unprofessional." Julian studied her with curious eyes. "When did you last eat?" The question caught her completely off guard. "You look exhausted, and I'm guessing you haven't eaten in hours. Room service should be here soon with breakfast. Might as well stay and eat something before you figure out what went wrong with your key card." Lila blinked at him. "You're not calling security?" "Why would I? You obviously aren't a threat." His mouth quirked into a half-smile. "Unless you're a corporate spy sent to steal my business plans, in which case you'll be disappointed. They're incredibly boring." Despite everything, Lila found herself smiling back. No corporate espionage, just spectacular incompetence with hotel logistics. "Everyone's good at something," Julian said with mock seriousness. "Apparently yours is creative problem-solving with sleeping arrangements." A knock at the door interrupted them. Julian moved to answer it, and Lila heard him speaking quietly with someone from room service. When he returned, he was wheeling a cart laden with coffee, pastries, fresh fruit, and what looked like eggs Benedict. "I ordered for 2, he said, as if sharing breakfast with strange women he found in his bed was perfectly normal. Seemed optimistic at the time. Lila wrapped the hotel robe more tightly around herself as she accepted the coffee cup he offered. It was perfect strong, but not bitter, with just a hint of cream. You're being incredibly understanding about this. It's the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months, Julian admitted, settling into the chair across from her. My life has become disappointingly predictable lately. As they ate, conversation flowed with surprising ease. Julian was nothing like what Lila expected from a man who could afford a penthouse suite. He was genuinely curious about her work, asking thoughtful questions about the places she'd visited and the stories she'd written. When she mentioned the food festival disaster, he laughed, a rich, warm sound that made something flutter in her chest. So instead of writing about innovative fusion cuisine, you're stuck with a story about creative event planning under adverse weather conditions, he summarized. That's a very generous way to put it, Lila said. Most people would call it a complete failure. Most people lack imagination. Julian's eyes met hers across the table. Sometimes the best stories come from the unexpected detours. There was something in his tone that made Lila look at him more carefully. Beneath his polished exterior, she sensed something restless, as if he understood disappointment better than his circumstances suggested. "What do you do?" she asked. "Besides rescue wayward travel writers and provide excellent breakfast company." "Corporate consulting," Julian said, his expression closing off slightly. "Help businesses optimize their operational efficiency." It sounded rehearsed, like an answer he'd given 1,000 times. Lila sensed there was more to the story, but before she could probe further, her phone rang. Her editor's name flashed on. "The screen should take this," she said apologetically. The call was brief, but stressful: deadline pressures, budget concerns, and the usual magazine politics that made her job feel more like survival than passion. When she hung up, Julian was watching her with thoughtful eyes. "Tough morning." "Occupational hazard," Lila said, trying to sound casual. "The glamorous life of travel journalism isn't always so glamorous." "Do you have dinner with me tonight?" The question came out of nowhere, catching her completely off guard. "Dinner?" "I know this is unconventional, but I'd like to continue this conversation somewhere other than my bedroom," Julian said with a slight smile, "unless you have other plans for accidentally breaking into hotel rooms." Lila felt her heart skip. "Because you're clearly successful and sophisticated, I'm a travel writer who sleeps in strangers' beds," she thought, but didn't say. "Yeah, because this whole situation is already complicated enough." Julian leaned forward slightly. "What if complicated is exactly what we both need?" Before Lila could answer, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was hotel security, along with a flustered desk clerk who apologized profusely for the mix-up with the keycards. Lila's actual room was 2874. She'd been one digit off. As she gathered her things to leave, Julian handed her a business card. "Think about dinner," he said quietly. "Sometimes the best adventures start with the wrong door." Walking to her actual hotel room, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just experienced something that would change everything if she was brave enough to let it. Lila stared at Julian's business card for the third time in an hour, turning the elegant cardstock between her fingers. The hotel's complimentary coffee had gone cold as she sat cross-legged on her actual bed. Laptop open to a half-written article about resilient event planning that felt increasingly meaningless. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Nina, back in Seattle. "How's Miami? Getting any good stories?" Before she could overthink it, Lila typed back, "Accidentally slept in a stranger's bed. He asked me to dinner." Her phone rang immediately. "Lila Chen, you cannot drop that bombshell and expect a text response." Nina's voice crackled through the speaker. "Start from the beginning and don't leave out a single detail." As Lila recounted the morning's events, she found herself smiling despite the absurdity of the situation. Nina's reactions ranged from shocked laughter to romantic encouragement. Exactly what Lila had expected from her perpetually optimistic friend. "So this gorgeous, successful man found you in his bed, and instead of calling security, he made you breakfast and asked you on a date?" Nina summarized. "And you're hesitating because it's insane?" Lila protested. "We live in different worlds, Nina. He probably has a penthouse in every major city, and I have a studio apartment with a Murphy bed. So maybe he's tired of his world. Maybe you're exactly what he's looking for." Lila walked to the window, watching tourists brave the lingering drizzle below. "What happens after dinner?" I fly back to Seattle tomorrow, and he continues his mysterious corporate consulting life. It's a recipe for disappointment. Or it's the beginning of something amazing, Nina countered. When's the last time you did something spontaneous? Something just for you? The question stung because Lila knew the answer. It had been years since she'd taken a real risk, personally or professionally. Her career had settled into a comfortable but uninspiring routine of budget travel articles and hotel reviews. Her personal life had followed a similar pattern of safe choices and careful boundaries. Think about it, Lila said, which they both knew was code for probably not. After hanging up, she tried to focus on her article, but Julian's words kept echoing in her mind. Sometimes the best adventures start with the wrong door. Was she so committed to playing it safe that she'd missed something extraordinary? At 5:30, a hotel employee knocked on her door with a delivery. Inside the elegant box was a simple black dress with a note written in bold, confident handwriting. In case you decide to take a chance, no pressure either way. Oh, shit. The dress was perfect, not too formal, not too casual, and somehow exactly her style despite the fact that Julian had known her for all of 3 hours. She held it up to herself in the mirror, and for the first time in months, she felt a flutter of excitement about getting dressed up. Her phone chimed with a text. Dinner at 7 if you're interested. There's a place I'd like to show you. Nothing fancy, but it's real. Lila stared at the message for a long moment, then at the dress, then at her reflection. Nina was right. When had she last done something spontaneous? When had she last felt this alive with possibility? Before she could change her mind, she texted back, I'll meet you in the lobby at 7. At exactly 7 o'clock, Lila stepped out of the elevator wearing Julian's gift and a pair of simple heels. She'd left her hair down and kept her makeup natural, trying to look like herself rather than someone she thought he might want her to be. Julian was waiting near the front desk, and his face lit up when he saw her. He'd changed into dark jeans and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking more relaxed than he had that morning. You look beautiful, he said, offering her his arm. Ready for an adventure? He led her not to a waiting car or taxi, but to the hotel's bike rental station. I hope you don't mind, he said, gesturing to 2 sleek city bikes. It's the best way to see the real Miami. Lila laughed, surprised and delighted. I haven't been on a bike in years. It's like riding a bicycle, Julian said with a grin, then paused. Wait, that expression doesn't work here. They rode through neighborhoods Lila never would have found. On her own, past colorful murals and hole-in-the-wall restaurants that smelled like heaven. Julian was clearly comfortable here, greeting vendors by name and navigating streets with the confidence of someone who belonged. He stopped at a small Cuban restaurant where the owner, a woman named Rosa, embraced him like family. The interior was cramped and loud, with mismatched chairs and tables covered in plastic tablecloths. It was perfect. Rosa makes the best ropa vieja in the city, Julian explained, as they settled at a small corner table. She's been trying to teach me her recipe for years. You cook? Lila asked, accepting the mojito Rosa had insisted on bringing them. I try, Julian said. It's one of the few creative outlets I have left. There was something wistful in his tone that made Lila lean forward. Left. Julian was quiet for a moment, swirling his drink. I used to paint, he said finally. All through college, I thought I'd be an artist. I had this naive idea that I could change the world with my art, make people see beauty differently. What happened? Reality, Julian said with a bitter smile. Family expectations, financial responsibilities. The art world is brutal, and I wasn't brave enough to starve for my passion. Lila felt a recognition deep in her chest. It's a corporate consulting. Pays well. Impresses the family. Slowly kills the soul. He looked up at her. What about you? Have you always wanted to write about travel? I wanted to write novels, Lila. Admitted epic stories about extraordinary people doing impossible things. But travel writing pays the bills, and it's stable. Do you still write fiction? The question hit harder than she expected. Not for years. I keep telling myself I'll get back to it someday, but someday never comes. Rosa arrived with their food, breaking the moment of shared vulnerability. The ropa vieja was incredible, tender beef in a rich sauce that spoke of hours of patient cooking. As they ate, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Lila felt something had changed between them. They'd both revealed the dreams they'd abandoned, and somehow that made everything else feel more honest. After dinner, Julian suggested a walk along the beach. The rain had stopped, and the night air was warm and humid, carrying the scent of salt and possibilities. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their feet sinking into sand still damp from the afternoon storm. "Can I ask you something?" Julian said eventually. "When you write about all these places you visit, do you ever feel like you're on the outside looking in, like you're documenting other people's adventures instead of having your own?" Lila stopped, walking. The question was so perfectly targeted it took her breath away. "Every single day," she whispered. Julian turned to face her, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "What if we didn't have to feel that way anymore?" "What do you mean?" What if we stopped playing it safe? What if we both decided to chase something real for once?" Lila's heart was racing, but not from their walk. "Julian, I live in Seattle. You live here. I write about other people's lives, and you optimize corporate efficiency. We're not exactly positioned for grand adventures." "So how?" He stepped closer, and Lila could smell his cologne mixed with salt air. "What if I told you I've been looking for a reason to make a change? What if I said meeting you feels like the universe giving me permission to want something different?" "I'd say you're caught up in the romance of an unusual situation," Lila replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe Julian conceded, or maybe I'm finally being honest about what I want. He reached out and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear, his fingers warm against her skin. "When's your flight tomorrow? Evening, 6 o'clock? Spend the day with me," he said. "Let me show you my Miami, the parts that matter. If nothing else, you'll get material for a different kind of article." Lila looked out at the ocean, waves, catching moonlight like scattered diamonds. Everything logical told her to say no, to stick to her plan, to keep her life manageable and predictable. But standing there with Julian, feeling more alive than she had in years, logic seemed overrated. "Okay," she said, surprising herself. "One day?" Julian's smile was worth whatever complications lay ahead. "One day," he agreed. "But I have a feeling it's going to change everything." As they walked back toward the hotel, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that he was right. Some chances once missed never came again. And for the first time in years, she was ready to find out what she'd been missing. The morning sun painted Miami in shades of gold and coral as Lila met Julian in the hotel lobby at 8 o'clock. She'd packed her bags and checked out, storing her luggage with the concierge before her evening flight. Something about the finality of that act, closing the door on her temporary room, felt symbolic. Though she couldn't quite name what it symbolized. Julian appeared carrying 2 travel mugs of coffee and wearing a paint-stained t-shirt under a light jacket. The casual look suited him better than his corporate attire, making him seem younger and more approachable. "Ready to see the real Miami?" he asked, handing her one of the coffees. "Define real," Lila said, accepting the perfectly prepared cup he'd remembered exactly how she liked it from yesterday's breakfast. Instead of heading toward the street, Julian led her to a service elevator she hadn't noticed before. "I want to show you something first. The hotel owner is a friend, and he lets me use the roof space." The elevator opened onto a rooftop that had been transformed into an artist's studio. Canvases of various sizes lined the walls, some finished, others half completed or abandoned. The paintings were stunning, vibrant street scenes, intimate portraits, abstract pieces that seemed to capture the very essence of Miami's energy and heat. Lila moved from painting to painting, speechless. These weren't the works of a weekend hobbyist. They showed real skill, genuine vision, the kind of artistic voice that could make people stop and reconsider the world around them. "Julian," she breathed, stopping in front of a piece that showed the Cuban restaurant from the night before, somehow managing to capture not just Rose's appearance but her warmth, her generosity, her fierce love for her community. "These are incredible. I come up here when corporate consulting becomes unbearable," he said, seeming almost embarrassed by her praise. "Usually early mornings or late nights. I told myself it was just a stress reliever, But lately, he trailed off, running his hand through his hair. But lately what? Lately I've been wondering what would happen if I stopped treating it like a secret shame. Julian moved to stand beside her, looking at his own work as if seeing it through her eyes. Yesterday, when you talked about writing novels, I recognized something. We're both living half-lives, aren't we? Lila nodded, unable to speak around the tightness in her throat. The paintings were beautiful, but more than that, they were honest. They showed a side of Julian that corporate consulting would never reveal. Passionate, observant, unafraid to see beauty in unexpected places. "There's something else I want to show you," Julian said, leading her to a canvas covered by a cloth. "I started this yesterday after you left." He pulled away the covering to reveal a painting of a woman sleeping, her face peaceful, chestnut hair spread across white pillows. But it wasn't just a portrait somehow. Julian had captured something ineffable about that moment when Lila had first awakened in his room, the vulnerability, the confusion, but also an underlying strength. As if the woman in the painting was on the verge of discovering something important about herself. "I've never painted someone I'd just met," Julian admitted. "But I couldn't get that moment out of my head. Not because you were in my bed, but because you looked like someone coming back to life." Lila stared at the painting, seeing herself as Julian saw her. Not the careful, practical travel writer who played it safe, but someone with depths she'd forgotten she'd possessed. Her phone rang, jarring them both back to reality. The caller ID showed her editor's name, and Lila's stomach dropped. She'd completely forgotten about the article deadline. "Marcus," she answered, trying to sound professional. "I was just about to send you the piece. Good, because I have another assignment." Her editor's voice crackled through the phone. "Food magazine wants someone in New Orleans next week. Jazz festival coverage with restaurant reviews. It's last minute, but the pay is decent." Lila looked at Julian, who was pretending not to listen while cleaning paintbrushes. "Actually, Marcus, I need to talk to you about something. I'm thinking of taking a break from travel writing." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Lila wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Are you insane? You know how many writers would kill for your assignments?" "I know, but look, Chen, I don't know what brought this on, but don't make any hasty decisions. Take the New Orleans gig. Think it over. We'll talk when you get back." He hung up before Lila could respond. She stared at her phone, feeling the familiar weight of obligation settling back on her shoulders. "Duty calls," Julian asked gently. "Something like that?" Lila sank into the chair Julian used when painting. "He wants me in New Orleans next week. Another assignment, another city, another hotel room where I'll write about other people's experiences." Julian set down his brushes and turned to face her. "What if you didn't go? I need the work, Julian. I have rent, student loans, all the usual adult responsibilities. What if I told you I had an idea, something that could work for both of us?" Despite herself, Lila was curious. "I'm listening." Julian pulled up a chair across from her, his expression serious but excited. "I've been thinking about this all night. What if we collaborated on something? A travel blog that combines your writing with my art? It's not the sanitized hotel reviews and restaurant recommendations, but real stories about real places. The kind of travel writing that makes people want to experience the world differently." Lila's heart began to race. "Julian, that's a beautiful idea, but nothing. I have contacts, resources. I could set up a gallery space where we showcase the art alongside your stories. People could experience destinations through both words and images. And maybe we could inspire them to look beyond the tourist traps." The vision he painted was seductive, but Lila forced herself to be practical. "And what happens when you get tired of this fantasy? When you realize that the romance of the idea doesn't match the reality of building a business from scratch?" Julian was quiet for a long moment, then walked over to his easel and picked up a paintbrush. "Do you know why I never pursued art seriously? Because it was financially risky? Because I was terrified I wasn't good enough." He set the brush down and met her eyes. "Meeting you has made me realize that being terrified isn't a good enough reason to give up on something that matters." Lila felt something shift in her chest, like a door opening after being locked for years. "What if we fail? What if we don't?" Julian countered. "What if we create something amazing? What if we help people see the world the way we do? Of stories waiting to be discovered? Lila's phone buzzed with a text from Nina. How did dinner go? Please tell me you didn't talk yourself out of something good. Looking at Julian, surrounded by his beautiful paintings and the possibility of a different kind of life, Lila realized she was tired of talking herself out of things. Tired of playing it safe? Tired of watching life happen to other people. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it right. Professional contracts, clear expectations, equal partnership. Julian's face broke into a grin. Does that mean you're saying yes? I'm saying let's see what happens when we stop being afraid. 6 months later, Lila stood in a converted warehouse space in Seattle's Arts District. Watching people move between Julian's paintings and the stories she'd written to accompany them. Their collaboration had evolved beyond a simple travel blog into something neither had anticipated, an immersive experience that transported visitors to the places it explored together. The current exhibition featured their recent trip to Morocco, where Lila's words about the Medina and Marrakesh were paired with Julian's paintings of light filtering through ancient archways. Visitors could read her story about learning to make tagine from a local grandmother while looking at Julian's portrait of the woman's weathered hands shaping clay. The Times review is incredible, Nina said, appearing at Lila's elbow with a tablet. They're calling it a revolutionary approach to travel narrative that makes armchair tourism feel like an insult to the possibility of true cultural exchange. Lila smiled, watching Julian explain his technique to a young artist who'd been studying his Morocco series for the better part of an hour. In the past 6 months, she'd watched him transform from a reluctant weekend painter to someone who approached each new destination with the excitement of a child discovering the world for the first time. Any regrets? Nina asked, following Lila's gaze. Lila thought about the question seriously. The transition hadn't been easy. There had been months of financial uncertainty. Moments when the practical part of her brain screamed that she'd made a terrible mistake. But there had also been mornings in Lisbon when she'd written her best work while Julian painted the sunrise. Afternoons in Bangkok when they'd discovered stories no guidebook would ever include. Nights in Buenos Aires when they'd stayed up planning their next adventure. None, Lila said, and meant it. Julian caught her eye from across the room and smiled. The same smile that had convinced her to stay for breakfast in a Miami hotel room that felt like a lifetime ago. He was talking to a couple who wanted to commission them for a piece about their upcoming anniversary trip to Greece. And Lila could already imagine the stories she'd find there, the moments Julian would capture with his artist's eye. Her phone chimed with a text from Marcus, her former editor, saw the Times piece. Call me when you're ready to write a book about this crazy adventure of yours. Lila looked around the gallery at the visitors, discovering new ways to see the world, at Julian, bringing her vision to life through color and light. At the life they'd built by choosing courage over comfort, and realized that some stories were too good not to share. Later that evening, after the last visitor had left and they'd locked up the gallery, Julian and Lila walked along the Seattle waterfront. The city lights reflected off the water like scattered stars, and the air smelled of salt and possibility. So, Julian said, taking her hand, where to next? Lila squeezed his fingers, thinking of all the places they hadn't seen yet, all the stories waiting to be discovered. Wherever the wrong door leads us, she said, and for the first time in her life, getting lost felt exactly like finding her way home.